Welcome.
Sorry.
Thank you for coming. I know you're probably wondering why on a 5:30 Friday afternoon. Well, for the employees, I'm just checking to see who's still here. And for the students, I want to congratulate our new officers. All of you who are newly elected, stand up and be recognized. It's not just the president, there are others as well. Now we have the other president.
He said newly elected. I'm not.
Oh,
I'm a veteran.
Stand up.
Oh, an elect, a veteran elected.
A returning performance.
Yes, it is.
Congratulations. There may be things that we can't say to other people. So I'm trying to weave together tonight some of the issues that I think are looming out there. You may already know about them, you may not know about them. So I'm going to start, I played with this all afternoon. I'm going to start by talking to you a little bit about Title IX. And then we're going to go into the grievance process that we have here at the university. You can't separate some of these issues in our university community. And they're becoming increasingly important to university and college campuses, and particularly where we live in residence halls. And I'm very pleased that we've got students, we've got staff members here tonight, all members of our University of the West community. For a number of years on campuses, it's been a problem. We have young men and we have young women. And there have been instances where young women have been sexually assaulted. Sexual assaults don't have to take place in a violent kind of environment. They can take place between two people who know each other well, who have been together before, who have had sexual experiences before. It became an increasing concern as it came to light on some of the campuses across the country. Sometimes in a big way, sometimes in a small, quiet way. And we all became concerned about it at the university and college level. I've been in university administration for a good many years. More years than many of you are old, in fact. And I've had a chance to observe this firsthand. And I too have been concerned about it. So in response, as this became more clear that it was happening on a regular basis, sexual assault on campuses, the government, the lawmakers, step in. And they want to try to solve the problem. They want to protect women. They want to protect men. They want to protect students. They want to protect staff on campuses. So out of all of this grew Title IX. And most of these kinds of legislation that come out of Washington particularly are added to as time goes on and modified. And they have been. So today, and I don't know all the technicalities, so I do the broad brush, and we have people here on campus who do know the technicalities and do know more detail than I do. But as it is today, on a college campus, when a man and a woman, or a woman and a woman, or a man and a man have sexual relationships, if they're not both consenting, you begin to have an environment where you can have a sexual assault. It's not, no, I don't want to do this. It's, yes, I am okay with doing whatever we're doing, whatever you want to do. So if at any time in this relationship, one party or the other says no, or doesn't say yes, I want to do this, you begin to have the formation of a potential sexual assault. And that leads me into the grievance process. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about how I think you can protect yourselves in situations where you're having a sexual relationship, and things you ought to think about before you enter into those and while you're in them. But let's put that context out. So remember, if a person feels that they've been violated, that they did not agree to what was happening between the two of them, or in some cases more, you have the grounds for a sexual assault. And in that case, a student can file a formal grievance. And universities and colleges have been charged by Title IX to handle these matters. It doesn't go to a court of law. You can report it to the authorities as a sexual assault. They can investigate it, and they might very well act on it. But a college or university where you are a student, if this is particularly between students on that college or university campus, is charged with dealing with this issue. We have no choice. We didn't ask for this. We didn't want it. We were concerned about sexual assaults, and all of us want to prevent them. But we have been charged with it, so we now have to act. So if you are a student and you're involved in some kind of a sexual encounter where you did not give your consent, you may file a formal written grievance with the university. Here it goes to the Dean of Student Affairs office. And the Dean of Student Affairs, Vanessa Karam, is our Title IX officer. She's our expert in Title IX, and it's her job to take that grievance and see it through. So the written grievance moves through a hearing process. And I'm probably missing some steps, but it starts with a formal written grievance. Both parties are talked to. Both parties may file written statements. So if there's a grievance that's filed, the person it's against has an opportunity to file a written statement, to see the grievance that was written against them. Then it moves into a hearing process. And for that hearing process, we will have administrators on a hearing committee, we'll have faculty members on a hearing committee, and we'll have a student or more on the hearing committee. The size of the hearing committee is up to us, depends on how many people are involved, what the involvement is, but there will always be enough people that were representing the administration, the faculty, and the students. Other people who may be witnesses, may have information that might be pertinent, are invited to file statements as well, written statements. Then the hearing committee has a hearing. They listen to both parties, it's usually two parties. They listen to both of those parties. They have a chance to ask them all the questions that they want to ask them. They may call others to come to the hearing to speak, or they may not. They may use just the written material that they have. They may call someone and question them. The hearing committee then determines whether or not they have what's called a preponderance of evidence that would lead them to reach a conclusion that sexual assault took place. It's a very challenging situation because usually it's he said this, she said this, or she said this and she said this, or he said this and he said this. And usually there are not witnesses. And so the committee has to piece together what they hear, what they read and say. Is it more likely than not that a sexual assault occurred and that we believe the person who tells us that that occurred? And then they can render a judgment about what punishment should be given in this case. Then that punishment is announced to both parties, and they can appeal. Either party could appeal. Normally they would appeal to the Dean of Student Affairs. If in a case it was felt that the Dean of Student Affairs shouldn't hear the appeal, then the appeal comes to the President. And the appeal needs to either indicate that there might have been something wrong with the process. Did we miss something in the process? Was it not a valid process for some reason? Or is there additional information that wasn't available to the hearing committee when they met and they heard these two or others and they read the information? Or number three, does the person want to appeal the punishment that was rendered to them? Do they think it was too severe, and do they have reason to make an appeal to say that's not a fair punishment? Then, whether it's the Dean or the President, they consider all of this. They might ask the hearing committee to reconvene. They might think, yes, there is more evidence. Would the committee please consider this evidence? The committee then decides, does this change our decision, either about whether we have a preponderance of evidence one way or another, or about the punishment that we have rendered in this case. The people are chosen for their ability to be objective, who are on the hearing committee, the Title IX officer who oversees the hearing, and we have an assistant Title IX officer in Juan Tinoco. So it could be Dean Vanessa Karam, or it could be Juan, who is the hearing officer. They're there to make sure that we follow the process appropriately. Now it's interesting because colleges and universities all across the country are now working with this new system. And we're learning as we work. It's going to be an evolutionary process. There are many who would argue that it shouldn't be a preponderance of evidence, that that's not fair. But that's the way it is now. And I have a feeling that as time goes on, and as there are court cases, and there will be court cases, because when a university or college has a hearing, when they find someone guilty of sexual assault, or when they don't find someone guilty of sexual assault, when they render the punishment that they think is appropriate, those people will have a right to sue the university. And those cases will go to court. I have a feeling, like with most laws, as those laws are tested in court, as there are trials and verdicts rendered, the process will be modified over time. We'll continue to evolve in that process with Title IX. For now, we consult with other institutions. We ask them if they've had experience with it. If they've had experience with them, we've asked them, how do you do it? What have you learned from your experiences? So that we may not make the same mistakes they have, or we may learn that they've had a positive experience doing this or that. And we've compared notes with other institutions to try to learn as much as we possibly can. In our case, the parties involved do not bring legal counsel to the hearing, and the university does not have legal counsel at the hearing. I happen to think that's good because it's not a court of law. It's not, in a sense, a legal process. And we're not prepared. We're not attorneys. We haven't had experience being judges in courtrooms. So that process works. I also think it's appropriate not to have attorneys because some students could afford to hire an attorney and others might not be able to afford to hire an attorney. So this keeps it a more level playing field. The university does use legal counsel in these cases to make sure that we're following the law of Title IX, to make sure that our process has followed all of the rules that we're supposed to follow in the process. So they review the process for us and help us understand if we've left a gap or if there's something else that we need to cover. Within all of this, within Title IX and within the grievance process, FERPA comes into play. FERPA protects the information we have about you. FERPA says we can't share that information unless you give us your permission to share that information. So for those of you who are students, younger students, we can't tell your parents what your transcript says. We can't tell your parents what your grades are. And even if they call and say, but Dr. Morgan, I'm paying the bill. Yes, that's very nice of you, and we're glad you're paying the bill, and we're glad you're sending your children to college, but I can't tell you anything about your child. I'm bound by law not to. Now, if you give me a signed statement that I can tell your mother what your grade is, I can tell your mother what your grade is, but not without that. So when we go through a grievance process, we do everything we possibly can to protect the information that's a part of that process, to protect the people who are involved in that process. So we know things we can't say. And sometimes there are rumors that we know we could dispel, but we can't do that. We're bound by law not to do that, because that's really to protect you. So, I'd like to talk just a little bit, and then we'll open it for questions. And I might ask Vanessa if she wants to fill in any of the gaps that I know I've left in this conversation. I want to talk to you about how you can protect yourselves. And I'm not accustomed to talking to large groups about sex, but it goes with the territory. So what I want to say is, just like I know there's alcohol from time to time on this dry campus, because I have eyes in the back of my head, and I have a very good nose. I know there's sex amongst young people who go to college and universities. If you're going to have sex, know your partner. Know who you're involved with. Set the rules before you have sexual relations. Know what the limits are. Know what you will do. Know what you will allow your partner to do. And talk about it. I think we're going to come to the day where you'll be the safest if you have a contract that's signed. And you might want to do that before the passionate moments start. Because we need to be able to read it, so you can't just scribble it out. It's got to be clear. I'm serious. I know I'm saying it in jest, or I think what will work is an app. And I'll give you a statement. And you keep that statement. And that's how you protect yourself. But know your partner. Know who it is. Casual sex on the run. This is not a pickup basketball game we're playing. This has much more serious implications. And it can be very, very serious for the person who makes a mistake. And the implications can last a lifetime. So know the person. Have conversations about it. Know what the limits are. And if you're going to do something outside those limits, get permission. Get the yes answer. And even then, people could change their minds. So you might have had relationships 24 times with this person. If on the 25th time they don't give you permission or they say no, that can result in sexual assault. That's my caution to you. Safe sex is more than wearing a condom. Safe sex is knowing a lot about the person you're having a sexual relationship with. Did I leave anything out, Vanessa?
One thing is once each person gets a chance to recuse one person from the...
I'm sorry, you're right. When we choose the hearing committees, we review the names of the hearing committee with the students, the one who has filed the grievance and the one who the grievance is against. And when they review that list of people, they have the right to recuse one member of the hearing committee and say, I'd like to replace that person. And we will replace them with someone else. And they don't, I don't think they have to give a reason, do they? They can just say, I'd rather not have that person on the hearing committee. So that is part of the process that they're involved in. So they know the grievance against them. They get to write their own response. They know who's going to be on the hearing committee. They have a right to take someone with them to the hearing to be their advocate, to be their support. I'm sorry, they can't really talk much, can they? But they talk a little. Some talk more than others. Just depends on who you take. But you can take someone with you to be there with you. So you have other eyes and ears. That can be very helpful. This is not a pleasant process, not a pleasant situation. And the people on the committee can ask all the questions they want to ask. So it's not a place you want to be. And I believe there are ways to prevent being there. And you need to be aware of that. And we're governed by federal and state laws. And we cannot weasel our way in or out of those. We're abiding by those. And we will do everything we can as a university to abide by the law. We want you to be safe. We want our students to be in a safe environment. There has been no rape that we're aware of on this campus. That was a question that was asked. There has been no rape. And sexual assault does not have to be forced. It's not somebody who broke into your room. It's usually somebody you know, and quite often someone you've had sexual relationships with before. So it's not something that is threatening the safety of our students who are practicing safe sex, by my definition of safe sex. I'd open it now for questions or comments that anybody might, anything else I left out? Ron, I'm glad you're keeping track of this.
Yes.
I should take you with me more often.
So we need to set ground rules for the discussion.
Ground rules for discussion.
Yes. Yeah, so please, please be respectful. Please direct all comments, questions to the president. Please, what was the third question? The third comment? Don't identify individuals. Please avoid identifying individuals if you have information.
And if you know of any specific situation, I won't be able to address it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's all on the side.
Let's try it. Make up more rules as we go along with it. Benjamin.
2 questions, Dr. Morgan. The first question I have is, how many appeals may a student file in regards to the individual grievance? Is it only one appeal, or is there multiple appeals, similar to our judicial system where there's multiple courts and it goes up levels?
There's one appeal.
Only one appeal granted?
Yes. And all of that is in our current catalog, and it starts on page, the student grievance policy, but the student life policies are here on 86 and 87, and then it goes on through with a series of policies. So they are in writing, clearly in our catalog. And our catalog is actually our contract with you as students. So it is a legal document. And we will probably continue to revise these as we learn more about them. And as we have to enact more of these, and we actually have to use these policies, we'll probably continue to amend them. So be sure to read each catalog as it comes out, because there could be changes in these. Benjamin.
My second question, Dr. Morgan, is outside of sexual harassment and the topics that we just spoke of, what are some matters that could be brought to official grievance committee? What is something that would be deemed, this is severe enough that things need to be stepped in and stepped to that level?
I'm going to ask Dean Karam to respond to that, please.
Anytime a student feels that they have been discriminated against or treated in a hostile manner, assaulted in any way, assault of course is not only sexual in nature, there are other forms of assault and harassment as well. Anything like that, and in fact students can always come forward even if they're not sure, what is this, and be advised on the process and what roads are open to them. I would like to say that the grievance process that we have published in the catalog is not only for Title IX related grievances, it's for any kind of grievance. Normally, when the situation allows for it, we always seek an informal process of resolution. It's in everyone's best interest when there's a disagreement or hurt feelings to resolve things through mediation, facilitated conversation, reconciliation. There are certain things, however, where that step is not available, it's not appropriate, and sexual assault would be one of them. It's not assumed that the sexual assault happened, it's just that you have to go into the formal process to hear that and review it. You can't offer to mediate over it instead. But that's, those are very tragic cases. And I wanted to add something to what President Morgan said. He said it has implications for the person who made the mistake, sometimes for the rest of their life, which is very tragic. It also has implications for the victim, the person who stands up, the person who comes forward and goes through what is often experienced as another violation of their person. It also has long-lasting impact. So besides besides being responsible that a hearing and an adjudication takes place, which we have to do by law, we're also responsible for the well-being of the people involved and to make sure that especially alleged victims receive counseling and care and all the resources that we either have or can find outside the campus and make those available to them. And all of this goes on unbeknownst to anyone else, really. So I just like people to keep that in mind. There are people going through a lot of things that you don't see. And, just want to keep some compassion for them.
One of the observations I've made in recent years too is that with social media, things can get legs very quickly. And there may be rumors, there may be untruths, and we as administrators who have information to the contrary can't share it. So I've learned not to believe everything I read on social media. I'm a little cautious about it. And it's unfortunate we can't tell you, but you need to know we are dealing with a lot of these issues, and we are dealing with the people involved on a private basis, so that people aren't aware of what's going on. If the people who are involved want to share it, that's their choice, and they may. They're not barred from that in any way. Yes?
I have a question. What steps are being taken to assure the accuracy of the assumptions? If there's no attorneys being allowed, to be part of the situation, how do the students know if there's accurate steps being taken towards the accusation?
Well, again, it's the hearing committee asking as many questions as they can think of and trying to determine, do they have a preponderance of evidence to reach a conclusion that they believe more likely than not this could have happened. They can't prove beyond a shadow of a doubt, and that's not the basis on which they conduct their interviews. Theirs is to see, is there a preponderance of evidence that leads us to believe this could have happened, and more likely did than not. And there are many in the country today saying that's not fair. And it may not be, but it's what we're bound by as a college or university under Title IX right now.
Yeah.
That,
I think that's one side.
Yeah, it's actually the Office of Civil Rights that has imposed that standard, which everyone knows is different from the standard used in the legal system and in the courts. But that's what they've actually imposed, the standard that we have to apply. But there can be cases where it's impossible to find a preponderance of evidence, and then a committee would say that. They would say, we just can't find that.
But wouldn't that be in the situation where an attorney should come in?
I doubt if an attorney could determine any more than the committee could with a preponderance of evidence. The attorney is not going to have access to any additional information. And generally, as we said, there are no witnesses. So it's very difficult unless someone confesses, or unless you can gather enough information to say, we think this happened. We think this is something that did happen, and we're convinced that it certainly could have.
I think you're pointing some good things out, Brittany. As President said, this is really nothing that schools want. I mean, we feel a great responsibility for our students, for safety, for community, but at the same time, we're educators. The last thing we want to do is sanctioning people or even having them leave our campus. Our whole goal, everything we work for every day, is to graduate our students and to have a wonderful experience while they're here. It's a reality that we have to deal with, and we're all human, and so it's an imperfect, always going to be imperfect. But I also remind everyone that in the United States, the decision as to innocence or guilt is made by juries of peers. It's made by juries of people. It's not made by judges. It's not made by people who are legally trained. So we're not exactly the same as that, but that's sort of the process that we're imitating. And that's why so far, and not all schools do it this way, we really think it's important to have student representation on our campus.
That's what I was going to get on the next topic, because I feel like the student perspective and the administration perspective is very different. So if the administration is what is making up the whole council, that's why.
There's always a student representative, depending on the size, but there's always a student representative on the committee, always.
We always have a faculty representative too, which we think
And how are these students chosen?
Well,
Depends.
yeah, usually according to our policy, according to the grievance policy, it's the student grievance officer. If the student grievance officer student issues officer, yes. If the student issues officer is either, again, we try to make these committees as fair and unbiased as possible. So we go through an extensive process of finding people that we feel are as disconnected from both parties as possible. Not in the same program, not somebody a work study that they might a supervisor of a work study, a student that has a group of people that have no direct connection with the people involved. So that so that all the information can be heard and processed, and so that it's not due process as the fairest process we can provide for both students. And to answer the attorney question, the school is not charging any student with any legal charges, so there's no real reason for attorneys to be involved because there's no legal charges being imposed into that student.
So when say they apply for like another school, and the reason for expulsion would that would that be clarified?
No. It will show on a transcript if a student has been administratively dismissed, but it will not show the reason, and that's part of the sealed disciplinary file. So that's not something that would.
So this wouldn't affect like their future employment, future schooling?
Well, like I said, it does say on the transcript that they were administratively dismissed. So, but it just doesn't say why.
Words on it. It'll just be, say it was for whatever you want, right?
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Okay.
You can give any reason you want if you're a student.
Yeah.
Sure.
We wouldn't be able to divulge that information.
And if they called us and asked us why, we wouldn't divulge that information.
And then another thing I wanted to point out, it's a really good question that you asked. At a lot of schools, we have this committee system right now that we've done a little bit. This is not something that we've done a lot ever. We like it because we do think it brings different, we try to have very balanced committees, gender-wise, background-wise, student representation. Each person who agrees to serve on the committee, and believe me, it's a service. It's a lot of work. People take it from the student participant to the faculty administrative member, they take it very, very seriously. It's very time consuming. It's very difficult for a small school like ours to do this. But we like it because we do think it's, so far we're able to sustain it. A lot of other schools do not do it that way. They have one person adjudicating and there's no student involved, especially in Title IX cases. So people that we've consulted with were like, oh, you do it by committee? We just have one person. And, I don't know where we'll go in the future, but that's what they do. No attorneys there either. Other schools have attorneys, but they have their own attorneys running the show. They have, a school like USC has retired attorneys and judges, and so it's a very different process.
April?
I was just wondering if, just for perspective taking, if you, Juan or Vanessa, from the experience of grievances that have occurred this year, approximately how many hours would you say that the committee put in to reviewing a grievance from all angles and all witnesses and all testimony from the grievant and respondent? About how many hours, just so that we have some idea of how rushed this might have been.
The committee will go, if it's a Title IX case, the committee, once it's settled, will go through preliminary training on Title IX to know what it is, just like a jury does, to know what it is they're looking at. Then they will review everything that's in writing. Then they will talk to each party, witnesses. Then they will deliberate. So I don't know, it could be a week's worth of meetings, but it won't happen all in 1 week. All those things take time. Remember, you have people who are also teaching classes, have a job taking classes, they're students, so you're trying to, which is one of the reasons why it's cumbersome to do it by committee, even though we think it's more fair. And a lot of schools don't. So, I would have to tally up the hours, and that doesn't include...
It's not just the committee. I wouldn't be able to count the hours that Dean Karam and Juan and I have spent on the grievances this semester.
And
I can't count that high.
And then the hours spent consulting with peers at other institutions. Legal counsel.
I want to get back to the
Lots of hours.
question about attorneys and the preponderance of evidence. Do I think this is the best approach? I don't know the best approach. The best approach is if all people who involve themselves in sexual relationships behave themselves and act responsibly. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. And that's where the frustration has mounted across the country. This has been in the press in recent years in a big way. And that's what's driven the lawmakers to say, we have to do something about this. We have to do something about sexual assault. You and I can do something about it by behaving ourselves, by acting responsibly, by knowing our partners, by knowing what we're doing, by thinking about what we're doing. And beyond that, then, trying to adjudicate it. I don't have a perfect way to do that, again, because so often it's two people alone in an environment. No witnesses. Now maybe if one of those participants talks, but if they don't, it's a very, very difficult matter. But we know there are lots of hurt victims running around, and they're not getting any kind of justice. So what's the way to really get the justice in this case? I don't know. So our legislators have taken a stab at it. Is it perfect? I don't think so. And they put the responsibility on colleges and universities. If you weren't in a college or university, you come under a completely different set of rules. And if it isn't reported to the police department, nothing will happen. But in our case, if you're on our campus, if you're a student at the University of the West or any other college or university in the United States, then you fall under this umbrella of Title IX on our campuses.
I'd like to follow up. My name's Alan Cossett. I'm a third-year graduating student from the Master Divinity program here, so I'm basically graduating this fall, or this summer. May, So, I'd like to follow up a little bit on what Vanessa talked about. I was one of the members of a committee of a grievance, a non-Title IX grievance. I was a student representative, and I was one of the 2 student representatives that were part of this committee. And you know, I've been out in the real world for quite a long time. You know, obviously I've got gray hair, and I've worked in the working environment for quite a while. And you know, one of the things that you learn out in the real world that there's not a whole lot of justice, especially in the workplace, because you're at will employment all the time, and you're pretty much at there's really no unless you have lots of money, there's really no justice. And you know, and I brought that attitude into the community here, and that was a mistake because what I discovered in doing this grievance committee, as being part of this grievance committee, is that again, it's not a perfect process, but I was deeply affected as a person and by the amount of care that the community was spending to try to come to some sort of just resolution. This, like I said, was not a Title IX and wasn't as fraught. This is much more of just trying to bring harmony within the community again. And so, but you know, it was very clear that everybody on the committee wanted to have some sort of resolution that was fair to all parties and that really cared about the community and really cared about the people who were involved. And so I think this would be a time where it's you know, you have to protect yourself, you have to be a little cynical. But my experience here at the school was, as imperfect as the process is, there was a real effort to try to resolve the issue, and try to be fair to all parties, and to try to you know, speak fairly for all parties. So I actually hope that some of you have a chance to serve on one of these. Well, in a sense I do. I hope we never have another grievance, but if there is one, yeah. The amount of work that you have to spend on it is pretty phenomenal, but it was a highlight of my experience here at school, and be honored to be part of such a committee. So I hope you will keep that in mind if you're ever in a position where you need to speak out or you know, feel like you may be retaliated against. There's always that possibility, but my experience was that the school took a great amount of effort for a compassionate resolution.
Thanks, Alan.
I hope you sit on my jury.
Richard, you're not going to do anything to...
That's right. I don't have to worry about you, Richard. You're okay. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm Deborah Rogers. I'm the second year in this suit, and I'm president of
have two questions. My first question is, when a student is found at fault in a grievance process and is dismissed from the school, are there any conditions under which that person can reapply? Or is it a forever thing?
We've had a discussion about that.
It very well could be, very well could be. It's not always the case, but it really
So
depends.
it is a possibility.
It is a possibility.
So a person could come and say, what do I need to do in order to be considered? for
Yes,
reinstatement?
it's a possibility. There's something called reinstatement. Again, it depends on a lot of things. The committee might, in fact, in their ruling on the sanction, might say that after so much time or after going through some sort of therapy or whatever, depending on the case, the person could apply for reinstatement. There might be cases where that's not offered. The person could appeal that, of course, as President was saying. So it's not an either or, Deborah, it depends. Yeah.
Right, thank you. And I'm guessing that you can't say about the cases that we have.
Cannot.
Okay.
We cannot.
My second question is, I know that the reason you're having this meeting is because we as a community everyone's been affected by things that have happened this year. And I would say that within the Master of Divinity program, we have all really been affected. And we have done our best to not gossip. We've done our best not to speak about anyone's faults and errors, and in general not to speak at all. But I have been through things like this with other religious communities, and I know that it's necessary to do work to heal. And my wish for us would be that maybe in the fall, we would be allowed to bring in someone from the outside who has experience with sexual misconduct in religious communities to come work with us. We need to be able to tell our stories to each other. We need to actually be able to name names, say what happened and how we were affected. And we need to be able to talk about what our hopes are for the future, how we can heal, and what we need to do within our community to improve the health of our community and raise our ethical standards. So I'm really hoping that it will be possible for us to do this on campus. And if it's not, I'm thinking about how we can organize ourselves to do it off campus. So my question is, would it be possible for us to do that on campus?
Yes,
Actually?
that's an excellent suggestion, and I think that moves us, I believe, or starts to move us to the next logical step, which is what can we do as a community to help prevent these things from happening in the future, and how can we heal from the wounds of this semester, which has been a very difficult semester for a lot of people. And how can we move forward better because of these experiences that we've had that have been so unfortunate and have affected a number of people. And certainly the people in your program are deeply affected by this. And so we need to put that on the agenda. And someone else had suggested to me that, and I think they had suggested that we probably should have some of the monks from outside and venerables come in and help clear the air and have a ceremony. And I think that's a very good suggestion. And my suggestion was that we would do that at the beginning of next year as well, rather than during the summer when people aren't here and aren't engaged. But I think that could help us get off to a more positive start next year. And I think we as a community really need to spend time focusing on what causes these grievances and what can we do to prevent that from happening in the first place. And what responsibility do each of us have to prevent that from happening? And one of the other issues that's come up since we're putting all the issues on the table is a male's responsibility in all this. And some of us as men feel that we're bashed from time to time. But the fact is, look at it mechanically, men. We are built as the aggressor in this relationship. And pound for pound, we're generally much stronger than a woman is. So I think we as men have an added responsibility in all of this. And we need to take that very seriously. And take it as a responsibility that we have. Women have children. We can't bear children. We have responsibilities that women don't have that we need to pay attention to. And I think that's part of what we need to think about as a community as well. And the only way that I'm protected is by my age. So, Vanessa?
I just wanted to, may I address Deborah directly?
Yes, you may.
I really wanted to acknowledge what you said about how the community of chaplaincy students, community within our community has dealt with this and struggled with it, and how you've treated it with so much integrity. And absolutely, you are the ones who can lead such a process on this campus in a way that we can't. Because of, we would support it and participate in it, of course, but some of the processing we can't directly involve ourselves in. Yeah. Thank you.
Christy?
Oh, hi. Well, one of the things that it's lovely to hear, sorry, can I direct at Deborah?
You should
Okay,
say
it's
Deborah,
okay with me.
yeah.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's lovely to know that you guys dealt with it, but at the same time, not everyone is okay when confidential things are getting around and everything. And it's very sad that people reach out for witnesses and all of those things, and then witness don't sign the confidential paper or anything. So it gets around and just starts gossiping and everything. How do we deal with that? Like, there is no way to deal with it. People will just reach out to people saying as, oh, I need you to be a witness, but they were not there. But at the same time, it's not retaliation. They're like informing a new person about it who didn't know anything. And there is no way to stop it. And then one person who didn't sign a confidentiality thing or anything will then tell others.
We're a very small community. I've been here just 2 years and know many, many people by name. And I think in a very small community, it's hard to have secrets and confidentiality. I think there are also people who don't want to get involved and have some fear. And I'd like to, there's also been an issue of people saying that they're fearful of, for instance, being a whistleblower, fearful of coming forward. And I'd just like to say to you, as the president of the institution, I don't want people to have that fear. And if you come to me with information that you think is important to the institution, I would do everything I possibly can to protect people who bring me information of a whistleblower nature. And I would encourage everybody in our community who works at UWest to do the same. That there are times when someone might have confidential information about another person that we need to know. And we can protect people who give us that information, and I will protect people who give us that information. Yes?
Yeah, I just had a quick question.
Did you write it down? Is that your script?
Excuse me?
Did you write it down?
Yeah, I actually wrote it
Okay.
down. Should grievances be cleared by friends of the party involved, such as like an administrator or a student who socializes on campus with the party?
What?
Did you hear the question?
Yes.
No.
I think it was conflict of interest. is what he
Well,
was-
I think what he's saying, should
Yeah,
grievances be heard by friends of one of the parties in the grievance. Is that correct?
Like, cause like how one said that when they bring the students in, we try to find like an unbiased student, or with like the administration, has a relationship with the victim.
Well, on this campus, I think it'd be very difficult for someone, particularly on the faculty or in student affairs, to not have a relationship with most of the students. It's just nearly impossible to find someone who doesn't know most of the students. And I want the people in student affairs to know all the students by name. And I want the faculty members who are teaching their students to know their students by name and to know them well. So it's really difficult to find people who don't know them. Now, what I do want is to hold everyone who is an employee of University of the West to the highest ethical and behavioral and professional standards that we can. To say, yes, I know that person, but I can be objective in this case, and I can hear both sides. And we have to have confidence that people can rise and work at that level on a regular basis. And I believe that we have a team here who do that every single day. I have great confidence in the staff to be objective in these situations, and I wouldn't allow someone to serve on a committee who I thought couldn't rise to that level and doesn't function at that level on a regular basis. April.
I think an important part to shed light on the process is what the chairperson's role is. I think that would be helpful. So the person who, especially in Title IX cases, so on our campus we have 2 people, Dean Karam and Juan Tinoco, that are Title IX officers or chair, and that they would chair the committee. What's their role in that particular sexual assault or harassment or battery case, and who are the people that make the decision in that process?
So the chair in any grievance committee is in Title IX particularly is responsible to make sure that the proceedings accord with all the rules and regulations, and really to lead the whole process from briefing all the way through to deliberation. There is also a person called the executive secretary who keeps the records of everything in the minutes. Those 2 people, the chair and the executive secretary, are non-voting members of any grievance committee. So it's the student and the faculty and administrative members who render the decision. So the chair does not vote on the decision, if that's what you meant by clarifying. Yes.
Christy?
About that, so if a student had a serious concern about the chair, she or he can actually raise the concern, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Questions? Yes.
You mentioned rumors, gossip. What if, as members of the community, we're a witness or aware of some violation that's going on? What do we do at that point?
We'd like you to share that with someone, and it depends on the nature of what you've observed, but if it's something you're comfortable taking to the Dean of Student Affairs, for instance, if it's with another student, you would share it with the Dean of Student Affairs. If it's with a staff member or faculty member, you could share it with the Dean of Student Affairs. You could also share it with the Chief Academic Officer. You could also bring it to my office. I have a huge staff in the outer office, and they'll start doing the door. But come right in. If the door's open, you're welcome to walk in. And we do appreciate it when people share information with us, and we want you to share it with someone you feel comfortable with.
My name is Mark, and I've been
a teacher in public schools, and I've noticed that when there is this kind of sharing that you're talking about, many times the heads up that you give to the administration is really important because it keeps things from escalating. So I really want to emphasize that, you know, sometimes we think we're telling something, you know, and there's this narc feeling, this, you know, but actually I think this notion is BS, and that it really feels like a healing thing to go ahead and, you know, state your truths, you know. Even it may not be exactly what, but at least administration has a heads up.
I'll give her a chance.
Lorena.
I have a question. When someone gives a statement, shouldn't it be more about what they saw or heard and not what they think that person is, such as their character?
Vanessa?
Yes, you're right. This is one thing that we've learned recently in these processes, that there's been some conflation of some confusion about what is a witness versus what is someone who just would like to share their opinion about another person. We've learned that in these processes recently. A witness is someone who has actual knowledge of the allegation, the alleged violation or incident. They saw it, they heard, you know, they heard it, they saw it, or they heard about it right afterwards. But that was something that we weren't careful with. So we actually, in an interest of kind of not pushing back anything that people thought they wanted to bring forward on their own behalf, actually had quite a few witness statements that were more character statements, and we, you know, look at those, but usually they don't tell us that much about what happened in X situation. So you point out a good thing. I actually wanted to address what Mark was talking about.
Patrick?
Mark was talking about
gossiping,
someone who brought information
Patrick's
forward.
question. Is it okay if people come all the time. Students come to us all the time, and they'll kind of like hem-haw around, there's something, and I don't know, and I don't want to get anyone in trouble, and I don't want them to know I said, and whatever, and we always listen to it, and we usually take our time. Maybe we've heard other things before about that, or we talk to each other, hey, can you kind of keep an eye on that? We never rush to judgment. There are certain things, however, when someone starts making, for example, me in my role as Dean and Title IX Coordinator, aware of issues around violence or sexual assault, where I have to say, no matter what you want to happen, I have to act on it. I have to investigate it. I will keep your information private, but I can't not do anything, because by law I can't. But I would really hope that people feel safe. Mostly what we're trying to do is figure out, okay, is there a problem, and how can we remedy it before it gets really bad, and there are consequences that no one wants, like Mark was saying. The sooner the better. It just helps the community. And if you know of things where people are in danger or really suffering, I hope you would come forward and talk to someone you trust.
And then also their responsibility to address it. Also your responsibility as a student, as a member of the community, to address the issues that you feel need to be addressed. I think we all have a responsibility to each other and to the community in general to, if we see something and we know that it has a negative impact on the community, to confront it and address it.
Christine?
Well, I just wanted to clarify, like you said that you have to act on it the moment you hear something about it, sexual assault especially, you have to act on it, but that doesn't mean that's a grievance. A grievance is when the victim or whoever comes and file it and then sign it, and that's the grievance. That's not what you do. You have to act and investigate, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And the second thing about the character witnesses and everything, that's not the policy violation or anything, but I feel like it might be more helpful for both of the parties if they don't see the irrelevant witness statements or anything before they get into the hearing. If they do see it, it doesn't make any, sense to see those things and then go to the hearing and everything. So is it possible for later grievances that they don't become informed? I mean, I think everyone has the right to see every document, but they should just be informed. These are relevant information you need to see going in the hearing. These are irrelevant. These are not for you to see. Don't see it. You don't need to see it. You don't need to rebuttal it but if you want to see it, you can see it after the hearing is over, anything like that. Is it possible?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Short answer, yes.
Thank you.
And actually moving forward, probably the only people that really need to see the information is the hearing committee. So not even showing relevant information to the parties, because the people who are going to be making the decision is the committee. So those are really the only people that should have all the information.
How come? What if the
We can talk about it
I disagree.
after.
Yeah, thank you. But how come? Like, you need to rebuttal the statements.
But anyway, back to the original question, and kind of what I was saying earlier was, yes, we have to differentiate between what is actually a relevant witness statement and what is some kind of statement on behalf or against one of the parties. And what would be relevant is what everyone has a right to review.
Yeah.
And mostly, quite frankly, committees really can't take those other kinds of statements. You know, they can look at them and they will, but they don't really.
They become judgment.
They don't have a lot
So
of
we'll
weight.
let Christy and Juan and Vanessa continue this conversation
Whoever,
at some point.
you're all welcome to it.
We're learning, but again, we're not a court of law. We're a group of each other on these committees, and we want to be fair to everyone involved. So in these cases, we wanted all the information we could gather. And then the committee in its deliberations determines what's important and what isn't important to our making a decision. In a court of law, you have a judge who sits and determines, no, this is not evidence we can show the jury. No, this will not be part of this case. We're not there yet, but we'll refine it as we go along. Other? Monica?
I'd just like to remind students that I'm very much, along with Mark and some other people, if you know of something that's happening, I really encourage you to come forward and speak. I know we might think of it as telling on someone rather than protecting them, but it really is protecting them. But if you're kind of in between and you haven't decided yet, you do have two confidential people that you can come to on campus. I'm one of them, JD's the other. We're bound by the same requirements, meaning that we can only disclose in very, very specific situations, such as suicidal ideation, imminent threat of suicide, not like I thought about it 5 years ago, but imminent threat of suicide, imminent threat of harm to another person, like I've got a gun and I'm going to go shoot this guy, I'm so mad, child neglect or abuse, or dependent adult neglect or abuse. Those 4 situations, and if you give us permission, and sometimes not even then, those are the only times we can tell anybody anything. So if you want to come and tell me you robbed the bank, I can't tell anybody that. But if you need someone to talk to, you're feeling really traumatized because you know this stuff and you're not sure what to do about it, you want to talk through your decision-making process, you just want to get it off your chest. There's JD, she's here on Monday and Friday, she's our licensed marriage and family therapist, and then there's me, and I actually have a signed contract with the university where I'm not allowed to tell them stuff. So if you're kind of in that between space, you have options.
Yes. April?
Oh, okay. So there is someone, a student who was not able to be here, and I offered to ask his questions and state his statement. So it's a bit wordy, and so I'm not sure. I think some of it, I mean, it shouldn't take more than a couple minutes. I'm not sure.
All right.
You're so subtle.
Yeah. Just bear with me.
People gotta eat.
Yeah. You might have already addressed this, I think, Dr. Morgan, but I told him that I would bring this up. It's Raymond McDonald from the chaplaincy program. One, are all parties adequately informed regarding what I understand to be the different rules of evidence under the Department of Education Title IX grievances versus the judicial standard of evidence of beyond a reasonable doubt for sexually related crimes?
That's not even in the catalog.
No, it's not in the catalog, but it's certainly in Title IX. And we, as a result of our experience this year, will be modifying some of the things we put in the catalog. And I think that's one of the pieces we want to make abundantly clear to people.
There's a whole list of rights that we give each party. Yeah, and I think we'll start publishing them.
Thank you on his behalf. Number two, speed. 65 consecutive Monday through Friday school days for the student grievance process. How is this working in terms of justice and minimizing costs to all parties? Are metrics kept, reviewed, and published in terms of number, type, and duration of cases?
I don't think we have to publish that. We do have to publish crime rates on our campus, but we don't have to publish grievances. And I can just say to you that we want to be extremely careful and cautious when we start this process. We want to make sure we are as fair as we can possibly be to all those involved, and sometimes that takes time. And if you've tried on this campus to get 5 or 6 or 8 people together at the same time for hours uninterrupted, it takes time. And so this did take a lot of time in one case particularly, and I'm glad we took the time because I think it was a better process because we did. So if you enter into this process, please know it does take some time.
Yeah.
And we're not going to rush it.
I don't quite understand what he means with the, but I think we've stayed within this, 65 Monday through Fridays. That's a lot of days. Really, we did endeavor to do it quickly, yet from step to step, to one person getting sick, to this, that, the other thing coming up. I understand why they have, I don't know exactly where that 65-day guideline comes from, but it's what we're supposed to try to do, unless we have a reason for it taking longer. It sounds like a lot of days, but they go by very quickly for some of us. Yeah.
Thank you. The third thing is a recommendation from him. I would recommend discussion and annual disclosure of expectations. I suggest the annual training and documentation because reviewing Title IX, it's clear that everyone on campuses are being held to a higher standard than in the past so-called quote-unquote college experience. With cultural differences and for many still developing prefrontal cortexes, guidance and prevention seem key. Such a
26, are you still there?
He continues, such a document should be authored by the community, reviewed, and include all perspectives and interests. And then his last question is, how does the process address the problem that the student grievance process has a lower standard of evidence and participants would seem to have less qualifications that in the alternative legal system in which lawyers represent all sides are provided?
Well, I want to go back to something Alan said. I'm over 26, so it's fully developed. And lot.
That's a really good question, and that's exactly the dilemma that every school
He
is
has a
faced with.
really good
Yeah.
point, and we are talking and have been for the last 3 months about what we include next year in orientation particularly. I want you to memorize all of these things that we've talked about so that you understand what Title IX is, so you understand the severity of violating the law when it comes to sexual assault particularly, because the implications are so serious for that. And I want you to understand what you do if you have a grievance, and who you go to, and how you file that grievance, and what the process is. So my hope is that we're going to repeat that until you're saying, yeah, we've heard that, we've heard that, we've heard that. And so you have it memorized, and you can give the speech too. Then we will have done what we can do to make sure you are informed about all of that. So he's absolutely right.
Yeah, and actually providing that is mandated. We're mandated to provide that. So you will all find out if you're coming back in the fall that we are going to have a training that we think is engaging, that's going to be online, that's going to cover all of these things, and we'll be able to track and make sure that all of our new students and then our students who are returning to register for the next semester go through that training, and that new students go through it every semester. So that's being put in place, but we have to have a multi-pronged approach. It's not enough. You know, there are conversations. I like the idea of what Raymond is saying, putting together some kind of document that's driven by the whole community. Workshops, trainings. It can't just be like, oh, I'm going to go on and do this program for an hour or an hour and a half, and now I know everything. It's really an ongoing process, but we are putting that in place simply because we think it's very well done. It's very inclusive and comprehensive. It's not just about men doing things. So in that sense, I think you'll be receptive to it, and we have to be able to show that all of our students have done it. But we really like some of the other kinds of forums where people are coming together and talking to each other. So we really want to promote more of that going forward.
And yes.
And also, in addition to the communication about the grievance processes and sexual assault and campus safety, I think a lot of grievances or wounds that were inflicted were as a result of miscommunication. And I think multicultural communication workshop would be very useful on this campus.
Especially on this campus.
Especially on this campus.
Is Dr. Lee still here? Yeah. Dr. Lee has made some great strides in that direction, and we hope that we can do more. And JD, our new campus therapist, that is her expertise. So we are having these conversations. It seems like it's never enough, but yes, very good what you point out. These cultural aspects would help reduce a lot of things that might lead to a grievance, one, and second, just make a better experience, a richer experience, educationally and for everyone.
Prevention of further wounds, infliction.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mika.
Any last questions? Richard's back there giving me my cue. Christy?
Oh, question. So about appealing, does the other person, so if one of the parties appeal, does the other person gets to see everything that he submitted or not? And why not, if not?
No.
Why not? What is she or he rebutting?
The person who has the appeal, that's their appeal, and then the other party can appeal that. We can have an endless
We can have an endless line of appeals. Oh.
Not very appealing.
Not really.
You busy all summer.
Sorry.
I want to thank you for coming out tonight. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, something that I'm very confused about the appeal not been answered is the evidence portion. So you say that you hold your employees here at University of West to high standard, but are we just, are we just taking that like, okay, what they're saying, like, oh, well, we feel like this happened since there's no like physical evidence, but they say that not to take the characteristics, like if somebody comes up to like, well, this person is so way, but I feel like from the student's perspective, especially a student who is on campus and interacts with both people at the same time, I actually do feel that it's crucial when a student says, well, I feel my opinion is crucial because it can help regarding like this person has, a past of, doing some this behavior, or this person has a past of, fighting many grievances. So the evidence portion, like I want it to be more detailed, like what exactly is the evidence process like?
Well, two things. Number one, the hearing committee does take into account anything anybody wrote and submitted to them, and they considered that. So it could be a character reference, it could be something they heard, it could be someone they talked to. All of that was considered by hearing committees in
because I was
our
little,
cases.
I didn't understand because, it was said that like, oh, people come here like, oh, give opinions, and we kind of just take that time. But what if those opinions are actually important?
The committees consider all of those statements. And they could call, well, to the level that they're submitted. They may not be equally submitted in a sense. But yes, everything that was submitted, they consider very carefully. And they question and ask all the questions they want to ask. And through that conversation, that's generally where they're going to pick up their evidence, if you will, the preponderance of evidence. Conversations they have with the person who files the grievance and the person the grievance is filed against. If there's anything from the outside that will weave into that testimony, they would also consider that. But it's all considered very carefully. They meet for hours and hours and hours. They discuss it. They have conversations about it. And attempt to be very careful. Sometimes it's very clear, sometimes it's not. As Dean Karam pointed out, there are cases where there will be no conclusion because there simply wasn't a preponderance of evidence that would lead them to a conclusion.
So without a conclusion, where does it go? What happens after that?
It's over.
Dismissed. Yeah.
So if the student was already dismissed, then and no conclusion, then what happens with that student?
Well, they wouldn't be dismissed if there's no conclusion.
Yeah, the case is, the grievance is dismissed.
It's dismissed.
I think that was a good question you asked, and it helps. I want to qualify that a little bit more what I said earlier. If anything that has some substance to it will be reviewed and further investigated by a committee. What I was talking about were more things like, I really like this person, I really don't like that person. Those kinds of statements, right? Keep in mind that bad things can happen to people we don't like. It's possible.
Other questions? April?
Oh, I just wanted to say, for instance, like, let's say something happens between two people, and there might not, for that specific interaction that allegedly happened at a certain time at a certain place, and there really wasn't anyone that was there to observe it or hear it. It's really difficult, and I think that the committee would ask in great detail of the two people that were there, in their own words, what happened. Okay, so you were there. What time of day was that? Where were you? Were you looking this way? Were you that way? And then they do that with each party, and then they see where there's consistencies or inconsistencies and do that. That's part of the investigation process. They don't just take what each person say and say, okay. I mean, they do a lot of detailed questions about it so that they can almost visualize being there and imagine that, because that's the great detail that they're asking each party. you know, an account of what had occurred.
Again, it's a preponderance of evidence, so it's not beyond a shadow of a doubt. It's a different standard than you would get in a courtroom.
And sometimes there's a lot of overlap between what both people are saying. In a case where there's a lot of overlap between what both people are saying, then there's more for the committee to go on to kind of figure out, you know, what may or may not have happened reasonably.
That's why it's so important in the choice of the hearing committee members to make sure that people who connect dots, people who are good at asking questions. It's good to have a group with dissimilar personalities and perspectives too, so that you're sure that you've got a broad representation in questioning. And it was important, as I looked at the makeup of committee members this last semester, that it was people I had a high level of confidence in. Some of them are people I work with every day, and I know their integrity, I know their ability to be objective, I know their ability to ask questions. And I thought we had highly qualified people who were on the hearing committee. Again, I want to thank you for coming out tonight. This is a wonderfully rich community that we're a part of. It's a very diverse community in many, many ways. It's a quilt. And we need to figure out how we weave that quilt together and how we hold it together as a community. And I'll say to the graduates, there are lots of things that can change in your life. You can change partners, you can move to different jobs, you can move to different communities, but the one thing you will always hold is your University of the West degree. That will always be a part of your life. And for those of us who work here, we're staking our professional careers on University of the West. If you're a faculty member, if you're an administrator, if you work on our support team staff, you're putting your professional reputation here. So all of us want to work together to make a stronger and more effective community out of University of the West. I am never satisfied. I've learned to live with that. I'm a perfectionist, but I've learned that there isn't much perfection in the world. But the one thing we need to keep doing is pushing the target a little beyond our grasp and always challenging ourselves to make this a stronger, more effective community. We're the ones who can do that. We each have a stake in it, and we can each contribute to that on a daily basis. And I look forward to moving forward from these experiences this semester as a stronger, more experienced community, a safe community for all of us to explore and to learn together. So thanks for giving the time on a Friday evening, and have a good weekend.
Thank you.